Chapter 2. In many people's eyes, Depeng was a quiet dragonly that was a little stronger and fatter than the other cats in the compound. Few people knew that Depeng was actually small and thin when it was young. Before Depeng was raised, the old lady with gray hair lived alone. Although her son had always wanted to take the old lady over, the old lady still preferred the compound where she had lived for decades and refused her son's suggestion to hire a nanny. One day the old lady saw someone raising a cat in the compound and had the idea of raising a cat. She was invited back to her hometown to attend a junior's wedding, so she planned to go back to her hometown and pick a kitten to bring back. She still preferred cats from her hometown. The old lady's hometown was in the province, not too far from the city. Every week, people from her hometown would come to the provincial capital to do business and transport goods. Naturally, they would also visit the old lady. After all, some of them could do business in the provincial capital safely because of the old lady's connections, so they would definitely come to visit during the holidays. Coincidentally, the female cat of one of the visitors had given birth. When he heard that the old lady wanted to catch a cat from her hometown, he immediately agreed. The old lady took the car arranged by her son back to her hometown. When she arrived, she found out that there would be a few juniors holding weddings in the next month or so. Although they were not related by blood, the relationship between the older generation was there. Some people warmly urged her to stay. The old lady also felt that it was too troublesome to go back and forth from her hometown, so she decided to stay in her hometown for a month or two before going back to the provincial capital. After all, many of her peers were old and might pass away at any time. She wanted to talk more while her bones were still strong. During this time, the old lady went to choose a cat. In fact, when the old lady went over, the litter of kittens were already more than a month old. They were strong and had beautiful fur colors. They had already been booked, but the family did not tell the old lady. They only let the old lady choose which one she liked. For that family, they often went to the provincial capital to transport goods, so they definitely had to build a good relationship with the old lady. Therefore, compared to other people in the village, they wanted to please the old lady more, as long as the old lady was satisfied with the cat she chose. As for other people who had already come to order cats, they didn't care much. It was just a cat. They would apologize and drink some wine and this matter would be over. However, the family did not expect the old lady to look at the litter of kittens and finally pick the smallest one. This is the last one to be born. Usually it can't compete with other kittens for food. It was born small and didn't eat as much as other kittens. This month it's even more obvious. The man stroked the cat's fur to comfort her. His cat was an old cat and was familiar with people. She didn't run away at the sight of people like other cats. Even when neighbors came to see their kittens, she didn't care much. Now that she saw an unfamiliar old lady, she was a little alert and uneasy. After the owner stroked her fur, she calmed down again. "That's the one. I liked it at first glance," the old lady said as she pointed at the obviously smaller kitten that was squeezed into the corner by its siblings. She picked a cat based on fate, and once she liked it, she decided on it. The master wanted to persuade her, but seeing that the old lady had made up her mind, he didn't say anything more. 4 kittens had already been ordered in this litter. He planned to keep one for himself. As for the smallest one, he planned to sell it when it grew up, but he didn't expect the old lady to take a fancy to it. A week later, the family sent the cat to the old lady. The kitten was almost 2 months old. In the past few days, people had gone to pick up cats one after another. There were only 2 kittens left in the litter. Now that the smallest one was sent over, there was only one left in the litter. As for naming, the villagers rarely thought of names for cats, so they didn't give much advice in this regard. The old lady saw that the kitten was thin and small, so she named it Depeng. She hoped that the kitten would grow up bigger and stronger in the future. Depeng. The old lady held Depeng with both hands and shouted the name a few times. Fatty, who was only 2 months old, was being held in the palm of her hand. His shriveled little body trembled as he stared pitifully at the old lady in front of him. His meowing was not loud, and compared to the other kittens he seemed much weaker. After returning to the provincial capital, Depeng grew in size and wasn't as shriveled as it was when it was young. Every month the old lady brought it to live in the military compound, and it was exposed to more new things. Depeng was very clingy to the old lady. It didn't need to be tied up with a leash, and it didn't run around the house as energetically as the other cats, which was rare among cats. However, even though Depeng was much quieter than the other cats, it was still a cat. Every cat had to pay a price for their actions, and Depang's price was an indissoluble bond with instant noodles. Once the old lady brought Depang to live with her son again. The old lady was pulled out by a friend for a chat, and Depang was left alone in the house. He walked around the house, then climbed along the legs of the table and looked at the things on the table. There weren't many things on the table. Other than a cup, there was only a bag of instant noodles. Depang stared at the bag of instant noodles for half a minute, and couldn't help but raise its paw to touch it. The sound made by the outer packaging of the instant noodles made Depang very curious. Just touching it wasn't enough to satisfy its curiosity, so it walked up and stepped on it a few times. Cut. A sound that was different from the sound of the instant noodle packaging made Fatty pause for a moment. After that he started to stomp even more joyfully. Although the caw sound could not be heard every time, it could be heard after a few times. So when Depang's cat father entered the house, he saw Depang squatting on the instant noodles, its two front paws still stepping on the edge of the instant noodles. The sound of the noodles being stepped on could be heard constantly. When Depang's cat father opened the instant noodles, he found that there were a lot of crumbs on the edge of the flatbread. After all, Depang wasn't that heavy, so the flatbread was still in good condition, but there were a lot of small crumbs on the edge. The next day, Depang's cat father looked at the clean table before going out. He went back into the house and took out a bag of instant noodles from the cardboard box in the corner. He shook it to hear how many crumbs there were in it, and then put the instant noodles on the table in the same position as yesterday. When he came back in the afternoon, he saw Depang squatting on the instant noodles and taking a nap. He carried Depang away, picked up the bag of instant noodles and shook it. Judging by the sound, there were a lot more crumbs than when he took it out in the morning. Depang, who was still a little confused after being carried away, looked at the person in front of it and called out in confusion. Depang's cat father let go of the instant noodles, bent his legs and lowered his body so that his eyes were level with Depang. "You like to play with instant noodles, right?" Depang yawned. "Okay, you'll have to squat in the future." So, whenever Depang was brought here by the old lady, it would have to squat for a while on instant noodles, and then it would develop to squat as punishment if it did something wrong. There were a few retired military dogs in the yard, and people would usually go over to give them some simple training. The retired military dogs were no longer in peak condition, and these simple training were just for them to move around. Unexpectedly, Depang's cat father took Depang there on a whim. Fortunately, those military dogs were very obedient and didn't show any aggression towards Depang. Depang wasn't afraid either. It didn't know if it was too dense or it was originally brave, but after a few days it started to play with those dogs. Later, every time Depang was brought over, it would play with those military dogs. To it was playing, but in fact it was training with those military dogs. Because of the cat's natural advantages, it was very easy for it to overcome obstacles. No wonder it treated it as playing from the beginning. Seeing that Depang's ability to accept things was so strong, its cat father began to have other ideas. He found someone to teach Depang and didn't forcibly change Depang's character. He just taught Depang to stay away from some dangerous things such as mousetraps, cat cages, and so on. Depang couldn't do many training tasks as well as those military dogs, and sometimes it caused trouble. Originally, the military dogs' training tasks were going well, but because of Depang's mistakes, the dog's pace was disrupted. Fortunately, it didn't cause trouble and it didn't run around. Even if it ran, it wouldn't run far. After disappearing for a while, it would find a high ground and start calling people. Other people also didn't say anything for the sake of its cat father. Cats weren't as obedient as dogs, and the people who trained the military dogs weren't as strict with them as the military dogs were. Many times, Depang squatted on the side and watched the military dogs train or ran along the side. Other people didn't think it was a big deal. Anyway, this cat was just there to watch. It was just running along. If it did something wrong, no one would hit it, so it was very easy. But the old lady didn't. Seeing Depang running and jumping with those military dogs, the old lady felt distressed. In the old lady's heart, military training was very tiring, and the military dogs were also tired. Thinking about it this way, her Depang must be tired too. She couldn't stop Depang from running, so she could only put in more effort to eat. Therefore, even though the amount of exercise was not small, Depang's body was still filled up. She took it to the vet for examination, but the vet couldn't tell the reason. They only said that it was probably the same as humans, eating the same food and exercising the same amount. It was just that there were differences in weight and weight. Depang had been taught by its cat father to play Morse code games since it was young. It could skillfully play some simple Morse code games, just as it could understand the short instructions during training. It could repeat the instructions taught. Of course, this couldn't be compared to black charcoal in general. Depang couldn't accept the more profound Morse code games. After all, it wasn't as special as those two games. Even so, in the eyes of many people, Depang was already an elite cat. However, as the days passed, Depang became more and more plump, and in the eyes of others, it was less of an elite. Which family's elite would be a fat cat? In the first year that Depang was adopted by the old lady brought her family home to worship their ancestors during Chinese New Year. She also brought Depang along. On the night that they returned to the village, Depang fought with two cats in the village who had stolen salted fish from their old house. It was 1 against 2 and the two cats kept screaming as they chased after it. The two cats didn't dare to walk in front of Depang's old house for a short period of time. Even when the old lady brought Depang away from the old house, the two cats only carefully wandered around in the distance after 2 weeks. The family that gave the cat to Depang was puzzled when they saw it. It used to be the smallest and weakest cat in the litter. How did it become the strongest? It was even stronger than its brothers and sisters. Looking at how fierce it was during the fight 2 days ago, and thinking about how old Wang's cat at the village entrance screamed when it was pressed to the ground and bitten. Maybe it was because Depang was robbed of its food by its brothers and sisters when it grew up, but it was very protective of its food when it grew up. In the eastern courtyard, the sheriff and Huang never robbed Depang of its food. They couldn't beat it and they didn't dare to. One time a cat from the western courtyard came over. While the balcony door was open, Depang followed the other 3 cats out for a walk. It followed the smell and sneaked in to steal food. It was caught red-handed by Depang when it came back. Depang, who was walking home slowly, suddenly became Spartan. With a speed that didn't match its fat body, it rushed over to the cat and bit it on the ground. The cat screamed in pain. The cat struggled to get out of the door with injuries, and a tuft of hair on its ear was bitten off. Depang didn't give up. It chased it out of the eastern courtyard and along the way, it pressed down on the cat and bit it a few more times. Since then, the cat didn't even enter the eastern courtyard. When it walked around the campus, it avoided Depang like the plague. Although it was protective of its food, Depang didn't eat indiscriminately. It rarely ate food given to it by others. Even if it was someone it knew in the courtyard, it might not give face. In general, although Depang wasn't particularly friendly to other animals, it wouldn't take the initiative to attack them. It would only explode when it was robbed of its food or when it encountered a dangerous object. It usually looked harmless. At first glance, it looked like a fluffy and docile cat doll. Some people also said that Depang wasn't lively. With the other cats in the courtyard in front of it, Depang looked like a slow little old man. It was much quieter than Huang. But for the old man, this was considered a good thing. It was very easy to worry about. The balcony on the first floor of Building B in the eastern courtyard had cement railings. Probably because it was on the first floor, Depang's balcony railings were wider than those of the people upstairs. Usually there were 2 pots of flowers. Sometimes the old lady would take out the insoles and put them there to dry. However, there was a spot on the railings reserved for Depang. Whether it was squatting on the balcony or on the railings, Depang always liked to squat in a fixed spot. Someone once joked with the old lady, "Does your family's Depang have obsessive-compulsive disorder?" The old lady smiled but didn't say anything. Like a trained soldier, Depang guarded the same spot on the balcony at the same time every day. It squinted its eyes and looked a little confused and absent-minded. But from time to time, its ears moved because of subtle sounds, indicating that it was very alert. The people in the courtyard seemed to be used to seeing the fat dragon squatting there quietly at a certain time. The children who used to walk in front of the building with their small school bags and sang, "The sun shines in the sky," had changed to riding bicycles in a hurry. Or they had gone out of the house to fight for their future. But every time they went home and passed by the building, they would habitually look at the balcony on the first floor and say to their friends next to them, "Look, that's Depang. It's been squatting there since I was young." The summer wind blew, rustling the leaves. The old lady was making cold cakes in the kitchen. She planned to bring them to her son's place tomorrow. Her grandson had called yesterday to say that he wanted to eat some. Depang, who had just finished its meal, walked out of the room with a smirk on its face. When it walked to the balcony, Depeng looked at a secluded corner of the balcony. It didn't find the key, so it retracted its gaze and walked a few steps to the balcony. It slowly licked its paws and wiped its face. Then it jumped onto the railing and squatted at its fixed spot, closing its eyes to take a nap. There were trees in front of the building and the leaves blocked the hot sun. Depeng squatted there so it wasn't too hot. While it was squatting, Depeng's ears twitched. A chihuahua was chasing after the sheriff. The sheriff didn't look at Depeng. It ran past the building and disappeared in the blink of an eye. It was going to take shelter at Xiaohua's place. The chihuahua, who didn't manage to catch the cat, looked around and saw Depeng squatting on the balcony railing. It immediately bared its teeth and barked. Woof, 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 woof. The puppies that were provoked by the sheriff were probably hostile toward cats. When they saw Depeng squatting on the balcony, they started barking at it. Unfortunately, the balcony was too high, and the chihuahua couldn't reach it no matter how hard it tried. It could only bark. There was nothing else it could do. Depeng opened its eyes a little and looked down at the chihuahua. If the enemy doesn't move, I won't move. If the enemy moves, I'll be as steady as Mount Tai. Depeng didn't get angry or bark. He just stared at the chihuahua in silence. The chihuahua's barking gradually became softer. He retreated, then retreated again. It tried to look fierce, but it was cowardly at heart. Then it left dejectedly.